Know this. Any challenge to my authority will be met with fire and steel. I am the master of Delhi.
मैंने सिर्फ दिल्ली पर राज नहीं किया, गुजरात के मैदानों से लेकर रणथंबोरे और चित्तौड़ के मजबूत किलों तक, जहां मेरे पातन का कारण कोई बाहरी दुश्मन नहीं था, मेरे आपने थे। महाल के अंदर साजिशों का जहर फैलने लगा।
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are unpacking a historical epic that honestly makes Game of Thrones look completely tame. We're looking at the astonishing rise and the absolutely spectacular bloody collapse of medieval South Asia's most polarizing ruler. This is a story of unparalleled ambition where loyalty meant absolutely nothing in the face of absolute power.
So, you might be wondering, how exactly does a ruler who built an invincible empire end up watching it turn to ash from within? Well, this brings us to the core paradox of Alauddin Khilji. Born Ali Gurshasp, his reign was this unbelievable mix of unmatched battlefield bravery, supreme cruelty, and incredibly controversial personal relationships. He didn't just rule an empire, actually, scratch that, he ruled as a force of nature, completely altering the political landscape of India. But as you'll see, the very methods he used to build this invincible kingdom were exactly what caused it to rot right from the inside out.
Okay, let's dive right into this with Section 1. A throne forged in blood, the betrayal that shook Delhi.
Picture this. It's 1296, right on the banks of the Ganges River at Karamanikpur. Imagine being in this situation. Sultan Alauddin Khilji arrives completely unarmed to meet his nephew and son-in-law, Alauddin, purely out of sheer affection. But as they embrace in a deceptive hug, Alauddin signals his soldiers, who drive a dagger straight into the Sultan's back. And to ensure his terrifying point was made clear, the dead Sultan's head was paraded on a spear for the entire army to see. Then, to silence the totally shocked citizens of Delhi, Alauddin quite literally showered gold and silver down upon them as he took the throne. He basically bought their temporary amnesia with unimaginable wealth.
But, gold couldn't secure his empire forever. He needed an unbreakable sword. And that brings us to Section 2, the 1,000-dinar slave, the rise of Malik Kafur. And this brilliantly illustrates just how far Alauddin was willing to go. In 1299, during a ruthless invasion of Gujarat, which was the richest region in India at the time, the Sultan's commanders spotted a slave unlike any other. During the devastating looting of Somnath and the markets of Kambat, Nusrat Khan found a eunuch who possessed both incredible physical agility and the razor-sharp intellect of royalty. He was purchased for the astronomical price of exactly 1,000 gold dinars. To put that into perspective, that was a staggering fortune, and it earned the slave a name that would literally echo through history: Hazar Dinari.
That slave was Malik Kafur. Now, when Kafur was first presented in the Delhi court, the fiercely hardened sultan was absolutely mesmerized. Recognizing his immense talent, Alauddin elevated Kafur far above the traditional nobles, the old ministers, and shockingly, even above his own sons. Kafur wasn't just an attendant. He quickly became the Malik Naib, the deputy ruler of the entire sultanate. It was an incredibly deep, personal bond built on absolute, unquestioning loyalty. While this fascinating dynamic played out in court, a terrifying external threat was looming. Let's look at Section 3, Mongols, Rajputs, and conquests, expanding the empire through fear.
Between 1298 and 1306, wave after wave of unstoppable Mongol hordes, we're talking the direct descendants of Genghis Khan here, hit Delhi. The terror was so immense that citizens literally stayed awake all night on guard. But Alauddin had his fierce commander, Zafar Khan. At the Battle of Kili, Zafar Khan fought with such ferocity that he completely broke the Mongol morale, though he tragically died in the process. And to ensure the Mongols never returned, Alauddin established a brutal deterrent. He built the Siri Fort. But it wasn't just stone. History records that the walls were literally packed with the severed heads of captured Mongol soldiers. It was just a totally macabre warning to the world: do not look toward Delhi.
With the northern borders secured, Alauddin turned his ravenous ambition toward Rajputana. Here, he faced warriors who preferred death over surrender. In Ranthambore, he used trickery and starvation to win. When defeat became certain, the human cost was just unimaginable. The Rajput women committed jahar, which is a heartbreaking tradition of mass self-immolation in a roaring fire to protect their honor from capture, while the men rode out to fight to the absolute death. This tragedy repeated itself in Jaisalmer, and most famously in Chittor, a siege allegedly driven by the Sultan's desire for the fiercely beautiful Queen Padmini.
Once again, Chittor fell. And once again, the ashes of Johar were really all Alauddin managed to claim.
Now, while the Sultan locked down the north in blood, his favorite, Malik Kafur, was dispatched across the Vindhya Mountains. He systematically conquered and looted the south, places like Devagiri, Warangal, and Madurai. Kafur filled the Khilji treasury with unbelievable wealth, including a diamond I guarantee you've heard of today, the legendary Koh-i-Noor. At this point, the empire was at its absolute peak.
But ultimate power is incredibly fragile. This brings us to Section 4, Treason in the Shadows. The invincible Sultan becomes a prisoner in his own bed.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer contrast. The man who once repelled the Mongol Empire on horseback was now completely incapacitated in bed by a disease called dropsy. His body swelled, his breathing became labored, and he was in constant agonizing pain. But you know what? The physical pain was absolutely nothing compared to the dark paranoia settling into his mind. The once invincible ruler was now completely isolated.
As his first wife, Queen Malik-i-Jahan, and his heir, Khizr Khan, partied, basically just waiting for the throne, Malik Kafur seized his moment in the shadows. Kafur slowly poisoned the sixth sultan's mind, convincing him that his own family was actively plotting his death. Step 2, Kafur locks down the harem, becoming the only person administering the sultan's medicine and food. Then came the ultimate betrayal. He actually convinced the delirious Alauddin to sign an order to imprison and blind his own sons, Khizr and Shadi Khan. Kafur had taken complete control. The invincible ruler had literally become a helpless puppet to his 1,000-dinar slave.
Everything Alauddin built was about to unravel at lightning speed. Let's move to Kausa and see how this builds into Section 5, the fall of the Khiljis, from empire to ash in 4 years.
On January 4th, 1316, Alauddin Khilji took his last breath. Historians are still debating whether Kafur poisoned him or simply withheld the right treatment. Almost instantly, Kafur buried him, installed Alauddin's 6-year-old son as a puppet sultan, and took absolute control. But in a striking moment of poetic justice, the man who lived by the sword died by it. Just 35 days later, Alauddin's loyal guards, completely horrified by Kafur systematically wiping out the royal bloodline, assassinated Kafur as he slept in the very same palace where he had just seized power.
Out of this absolute bloodbath, another of Alauddin's sons, Mubarak Shah, claimed the throne. But he was the complete polar opposite of his father's iron-fisted discipline. Historians from the era note that Mubarak Shah would frequently arrive at court dressed in women's clothing, sometimes even running completely naked among the stunned nobles. He totally disgraced the dynasty's image and ended up handing all actual power over to his favorite, a fiercely ambitious man named Khusro Khan.
Now, Khusro Khan belonged to the Baradu community and harbored a very deep resentment against the Khiljis. So, in 1320, Khusro and his men murdered Mubarak Shah, brutally throwing his severed head into the courtyard. Khusro briefly took the throne, installing Hindu idols in the palace in this dramatic reversal of power. But this was incredibly short-lived. A fiercely loyal frontier guard named Ghazi Malik marched on Delhi the second he heard the news and completely crushed Khusro Khan's forces. When Ghazi Malik finally entered the palace, he found not a single Khilji heir left alive. And just like that, the entire lineage was gone and the Tughlaq dynasty was born.
So the crucial point is this. Alauddin Khilji built a fortress of skulls and an empire of absolute iron. Yet the whole shebang completely evaporated in just 4 years after his death. Empires built solely on fear and the sword are destined to turn to ash from within. It leaves us with a really fascinating question to ponder. If ultimate power requires absolute ruthlessness, is the architect of that power always destined to become its final victim? Think about that, and keep questioning the history you think you know. See you next time.